And you kind of alluded to that when you talked about, you know, the employees would move with their contract to a private employer who would be maybe a tougher employer than the city, maybe a tougher bargainer, right? So you're interested in the well, no, and I understand that defending the interests of the union, but how is that necessarily a public good?
I got to try making this clear before. I worked for CUPE. I retired almost 10 years ago. The mayor left the Construction Association about 10 months ago. No one. I'm just drawing analogies. People seem to be insinuating things about what I did 12. I am not here for CUPE. I don't work for CUPE. I don't negotiate for those employees. CUPE can, in fact, will, in fact, I hope, carry on and look after those employees. That's not what Water Watch does. The key thing about the transfer of the employees is the transfer of who's telling them what to do. They won't be told what to do by the city anymore. They will be told what to do by the private contractor. Okay? So that's the issue. This is not. We are not about those employees. That's the union's job, and we are not the union.
Yeah, no, listen, I was just trying to get at the issue of public interest, union interest. Are they necessarily always aligned? That's the only point I was trying to make. That's all. Yeah, I just raised the point. Okay, before I get into further trouble here, I better go to the questions. So, I actually had one for the mayor too, but maybe I better not do it. So this is intended for both of the participants. And maybe we'll start with the mayor. Are design, bid, build, and P3 the only options? What about using a model similar to EPCOR in Edmonton, in which a public utility is created to run the wastewater treatment plant? In this way, the advantages of both could be included.
I'll start with that one. Excellent question. We are precluded from looking at any other model because the question that the Water Watch group had on this petition really limits us to a design, bid, build. There are many other options of construction beyond just design, bid, build, and a P3. No question about that. EPCOR is a leading example of public-private partnerships and other models that do provide value for money and do protect taxpayers. No question about that. But we're hamstrung because we have an either or, a yes or no now. If we had a different question on the ballot, we would have a different answer. But because we chose to go with the question from Water Watch, it's a yes or no answer.
Jim?
Okay, so a couple of issues. What limits the choice is not the ballot question. What limits the choice is the fact that we can only get access to our federal government tax dollars, or we're being told we can only get access to them, if we pick up a private partner. And with that private partner, there's higher borrowing costs. So yes, I mean, our proposal was to go with the design, bid, build approach, because every other one of those brought with it that problem of bringing in the private partner and those higher financing costs. And that's really what makes it economically unviable, okay? But again, there's also an issue. We think the design, bid, build keeps it in public control. Design, bid, build is, some people call it a public-private partnership because it is, because in fact it's going to be a private company that carries out the construction. But in the design, bid, build, many companies can apply for that or for part of that project. The number of companies that can apply for the P3 are very limited because you need to be able to design that, you need to be able to finance it, you need to be able to build it, and then you have to take on the responsibility to operate and maintain it for the next 30 years. About 2010, the president of the Saskatchewan Construction Association said that they were bad deals for local construction companies. That man was Michael Fouché. So, I mean, that's the question. And then the other question, of course, is that's the question we put before the city. But remember, there were lots of twists and turns and bumps and thumps getting this on the ballot. It was City Council's unanimous decision that this would be the ballot question. And we think it's the appropriate one. We're very happy about that. But where it stood that Monday night, that was, that was not something that we were going to be able to have happen unless we went to court. And City Council, to their credit,
Good.
went ahead with that ballot question.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks. Okay, I have a question here to the mayor, and there's kind of two things. This is addressed to the mayor. The voting card I just received from the city, which is this, indicated not only where I was to vote, but continued to advocate for the no side. Given the demonstrated partisanship of the city clerk's office and city administration on this issue and lack of neutrality, will the city be involving an independent third party to monitor the referendum and confirm the results?
The city clerk is not involved with any of the publication of this information. It's done by members of city council or volunteers. We're simply providing a service to people, as you do in any election campaign. Any literature you receive from any party will say, do we want to vote this person in, or in this case, vote a certain way in a referendum, and by the way, for convenience sake, here is where you vote. There is no, well, that's the way it is. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. That's how things work. But the city clerk is not involved with the education campaign and literature going out from the city of Regina. It's separate from that, and there's no connection whatsoever. And again, I think Water Watch would like to make this way so they can appeal, do something do something after the result of the referendum. But I want to be clear here. There is a firewall separation between city council and the clerk's office on those activities. I know Mr. Holmes thinks it's funny, but it's true. It's absolutely true. So this is saying, again, with any campaign, you have literature given by a position, convenient telling you where you vote, because the question often is, where do I vote? It's simply providing information. Simple as that.
Thank you, Mayor. Now this one's to, this one is to Jim Holmes. Mr. Holmes, can you please explain in basic math how your group proposes to make up the $58.5 million in lost funding from the federal government if you are successful?
What we are not going to do is we are not going to spend money on higher interest rates. Again, the British government says this about them. They say the P3s, you get something now and you pay for it later. And that is addictive to the bureaucrats, right? It's addictive to the politicians, because we're getting a sewage treatment plant out of that model, and the cost comes due long after their term of office is done. And that's the problem with them, okay? You get this immediate upfront hit from the federal government P3 grant, and then you get to pay for that, okay? It really is like an addiction. You wreck your financial health on that one. Okay, and that's the problem, and that's the issue. Those higher borrowing costs over 30 years, those higher transaction costs, that higher return on equity, that higher corporate profit, wipes out the whole value. It's gone. It doesn't get you anything. It just goes to pay all your interest costs. And then you have to cough up some more money to about $34 million over those 30 years. And so that's the problem. That's how it works. The issue is not how are we going to replace that money. It's that if we take that money, it comes with a very long tail. And that tail's like a scorpion. It will sting us.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. This one is to both debaters. Over the infrastructure life cycle, which concept is expected to provide better value to the ratepayers? Mayor?
Well, for the City of Regina, in our evaluation for a public-private partnership, it is with the public-private partnerships, with the P3, where the operation and maintenance of it for 30 years, rests with the company that's competing for that work to do it. We have again, a fixed price contract and performance measures out during the term of that 30 years. And one misconception that may be out here is that once we build a building or a facility of any kind, that we never maintain it. Well, through the life cycle of this facility, we want to dedicate resources to make sure that the wastewater treatment plant remains state-of-the-art, remains new, and that people are proud that work there are proud to be there. So over the course of the 30 years, we have a schedule of maintenance and operation that will make this work very well. And the company will be held accountable to do that. Now, their margins are low, but they have income for 30 years to do that. We believe on our modeling, and it is in Deloitte, that talks about what that looks like. It's a $20 million savings over the course of that 30 years. So the total savings to taxpayers is about $79 million. That includes the federal grant of $58.5 million. There's without question that Council unanimously agreed to do this because we evaluated this with our experts in the city administration, our staff, as well as outside consultants, that there was absolutely no question this is the best way to go. When we look at maintaining an asset over 30 years, municipalities do not always have the best track record because, as I tell you before, that the money we receive through taxpayers, 8 cents of every dollar, is difficult to always maintain and add new infrastructure. So from our perspective, it is absolutely clear, and 11 members of City Council spent years looking at this and agreed this is the way to go. The savings are with the P3, no question.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim?
I think I've spoken long enough about the interest rates that come with the P3 model, right, and why that's a problem. It's a very interesting comment. I mean, we heard in the biography that Mayor Fougere has been on City Council for 15 years, and he just told us they haven't been looking after our infrastructure all that time. Well, and the other question is money. This is not an issue. I mean, there are issues, obviously, about taxation and about these huge infrastructure problems cities all over the place face. And that's why the Federation of Canadian Municipalities said to the federal government, give us that infrastructure money, but don't tie our hands to a P3. If that's a good idea, we can make that decision locally. Don't dictate that to us from Ottawa. That was the resolution, and I understand the Regina City Councillors voted for it. Okay, so that's the first question. But in terms of the water and sewer utility, there is no shortfall. It has a revenue of about $103 million a year right now. And it has expenditures of somewhere around $60 million a year. Okay? There is a $43 million contribution to the reserve fund, and there is $7 million more the City Council transfers back into general revenues, calling it a property tax, or an equivalent to property tax. But it's not. It's a corporate tax. They levy it on the revenue of the wastewater, the water and sewer utility. So there's lots of money in there. There are lots of demands on it. But if you look through the budget, what you'll see is the city spends lots of money on water and sewer systems. Most of that is financed by levies on the developers for new developments. I'm not saying we don't have lots of old pipes, but there is lots of money in that system. It's not poor, and it is a guaranteed stream, right? Unless our biology changes significantly, we are going to have to keep paying for that. And the other one you've noticed is the city, talks about keeping property taxes low, but it doesn't talk about keeping water and sewer rates low. 9% a year for the last 7 years, and the city says they're going to keep on going at that same rate, right? So there's money in that to do what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. This question is for the mayor. Why does the city say that P3, and we've touched on this subject earlier a little bit, why does the city say that P3 is the only way to ensure there are not cost overruns? I'm a lawyer, and the way to avoid cost overruns is to write it into the contract, P3 or design bid build. In fact, lots of public procurements are tendered on the basis that the price is guaranteed.
I'd actually differ with that comment. I think the reason it's different is that on design bid build, there is nothing in a traditional, because this is the word here is traditional design bid build, that holds the builder accountable for any cost overruns. They will not eat that. That's again, I repeat, 70% of public sector contracts done through design bid build are over budget. And I want to say that that's an issue council faced in a broad sense. So our conundrum, we want to build this facility, it will be built. What's the best way to ensure taxpayers are protected? And I have to say, I'm interested in Mr. Holmes' comments that we can have a fixed price contract on design bid build. Let me tell you that is not what happens. Now, what I'm hearing then, therefore, is that maybe Mr. Holmes isn't quite so clear that design bid build is as good as it could be. Because once you get into a fixed price contract, you're talking about project management, you're talking about another relationship with other builders, other entities that are involved with building, and that is not a design bid build. It's moving away from that model. So maybe Mr. Holmes is not quite clear, or certainly isn't clear what this means, but what he's really saying is that the issue on the ballot may not be the best solution to build our sewage treatment plant. It's a different model he's talking about. When you talk about a fixed price contract, you move away from a design bid build. Interesting concept.
Question, thank you, Mayor. Question for Mr. Holmes. Why does Water Watch keep referring to, quote, drinking water and, quote, privatization? Is that not misleading the public?
I had hoped I had addressed this sufficiently. I don't remember anyone ever talking about drinking water. It was the wastewater treatment plant petition. That was the question. How are we going to build our new wastewater treatment plant? Okay, that's the question we submitted, and the one in the city adopted. I don't know where this comes from. Lots of people say it. We didn't. Okay, so that's the first issue. Now, the question of privatization. The mayor seems to define privatization as only the selling of an asset. But when I look it up in the dictionary, it may mean that, certainly. But it also means the idea that you are contracting out work, that you are turning a service that was in the public sector and done not for profit over to a private-making company. That's privatization too. People seem to think, it's interesting how they don't want it to be privatization. I mean, I remember the last people in this province who didn't like to say privatization. They liked to say public participation. Remember that? We had a department of public participation. A lot of them went to jail. Some of them went to the Senate. One of them went to the Senate and to jail. Now talk about a resume. So this idea, and this turns up all over, that people, and in England they don't call it privatization, they call it public finance initiatives. This idea that you keep changing the terms. It's like it used to be the wastewater treatment plant, and now it's gone back to being the sewage treatment plant, a term from 50 years ago. You know, let's talk about this. We're talking about a public asset delivered for the public good, non-profit. That's what we have now. What we're talking about here is a service to the public delivered by a private corporation for a profit. And I would say that constitutes privatization. And again, this thing is not going to be over until I'm 93. For all intents and purposes, that plant is going to be run, not owned, but run by a private company.
Sorry, well, yeah, because we got so many questions here. We want to get through as many as we can. So I ask you to try to be as concise as possible.